news, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. We have made it to the home stretch of today's show, and thus the nitty-gritty of today's show. The exciting part, I promise you guys, a comprehensive betting preview for both the NFL weekend and what should be a fascinating weekend in college football as well. That will come as our last segment of the day. And let's jump right into the NFL. Also, like I said, if you want to even talk about last night's game, if you have any questions, comments, concerns about fantasy implications about last night's game, I will be willing and open to talk about everything that you choose to leave in the comments. But I actually do kind of want to touch on some of the fantasy implications for last night's game. Because there were, in my humble opinion, more questions about the fantasy implications of last night's game than any game this weekend, in my opinion. Everyone wanted to see the Chiefs wide receivers who would cement themselves as true wide receiver one, and thus a player that a lot of people would love to have on the open market. If Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, would have this kind of situation where one or the other is going to have a more dominant game, and we did see that. How about Isaiah Likely profiling perhaps as the tight end one for the Baltimore Ravens? No one had that on their bingo card. So there were a lot of different questions. The thing for me, for both teams, was for the Chiefs especially. No matter who's on the field for them at wide receiver, they're always going to scheme a guy open. I'm not saying that's going to translate to, a guy like Justin Watson suddenly being a high-end, say, wide receiver 2, but I'm saying that it's a good thing in terms of production, say if you have Patrick Mahomes, but also an interesting thing week by week to see who might profile as a guy who's going to get more touches. I wasn't expecting, Xavier Worthy to get only 2 touches, but he did the most with them. I wasn't expecting, Rashee Rice to get as many early looks as he did, but he did the most of them. I wasn't expecting Travis Kelce, for the most part, to be kind of quiet this game. So expect the unexpected with the Kansas City Chiefs in terms of fantasy. And for the Ravens, I liked what I saw in Lamar in terms of his agility in the passing game. As Shep Easy Sweet Spot says, if Lamar runs that much week to week, is an injury waiting to happen? That's an interesting point. And especially if that offensive line can't hold up, I have a lot of trepidations about them as well. But for the most part, he looked very agile in open space. He took what the Chiefs defense gave him. But I am concerned not just about the O-line, but about the subsequent passing attack or lack thereof for the Ravens. I appreciated the fact that Justin Hill became a crucial part of that offense for some reason because of all the dump-offs. But if you're going to line up Mark Andrews as almost like a tackle on your offensive line, then you're not going to have success. I was really disappointed in Mark Andrews. Yes, he was coming off some injuries, but I was really disappointed that he was used more as a blocker than as a pass catcher, because he is really Lamar Jackson still his favorite weapon, in my humble opinion, in this offense. Yeah, Zay Flowers is going to have his moments. Rashad Bateman had a big moment. Isaiah Likely really stepped up. But I still think Mark Andrews needs to be an X factor in this offense. As for Derrick Henry, I kind of had a gut feeling he just wouldn't work. But at the end of the day, he still is someone who a lot of people might covet on the market. But just be wary of him. Maybe he's going to be more of a matchup week-by-week guy to see how the Ravens will use him in the future. But that's my 2 cents. If you want to continue leaving comments about that game, you are free to do so. But let's jump into tonight's game. Taking place in Brazil. Should be a very exciting, as Tap to Learn says, Reed makes it hard to ride one horse on that offense. Very unpredictable. Yes, another good point. The unpredictability and versatility of that Chiefs offense is one that kind of gives me pause, but at the end of the day, it's about what those receivers make with those touches they get. Xavier Worthy didn't get many touches, like I said, but he made the most of them. Rashee Rice as well. Justin Watson, big catch. Only catch of the game, I believe. As Danny Finspan, I believe I'm saying that correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, has a trade or a suggestion in terms of, I believe this is a flex position that he's talking about. Jerome Ford or Christian Watson. We talked about Jerome Ford a little bit on yesterday's show. He's a player that I really, really like stepping up in the absence of Nick Chubb. But my question about him is, can he sustain it? But Christian Watson is another guy who you're a little bit worried about in injury history. So these are two guys who I have very different worries about. Jerome Ford, if he can truly step into the role, if the Browns need him to as RB1 in that setup, and for Christian Watson just to stay on the field and earn the trust, as Danny Finspan corrects me and says, start him or Christian Watson in my flex. So for a flex position, I would start Jerome Ford. And I want Christian Watson to, be a part of that Packers offense, but right now he is sinking lower and lower on that wide receiver depth chart, in my opinion. And Jerome Ford has a unique opportunity to take advantage of the absence of Nick Chubb and really step up in that Browns offense. I think he's going to get a lot of touches. The Browns running attack is always going to be very versatile, whether or not Nick Chubb is on the field. So I just love Jerome Ford. It's a tough matchup, I know, against the Cowboys. Their run defense, though, isn't as respectable as what they've done in the pass defense in terms of takeaways. So look for the Browns to try and exploit that. So I'm more confident in Jerome Ford at this current moment than Christian Watson, because I really don't know how many targets Christian Watson's going to get in that Packers offense. But fantastic question, because they're two differing players with two differing questions about them. But at the end of the day, I'm more confident in Ford, even though he has a tougher matchup. Let's talk about why I don't think Christian Watson will profile in this game and how it translates to the betting odds for tonight's game. As we all know, Packers-Eagles tonight, 8:15. And there's a lot of interesting storylines. These are two teams made the playoffs out of the NFC. And they really went in drastic directions once they got there. The Packers outperformed expectations. Nobody expected Jordan Love to be this good. No one expected that really young, the youngest wide receiver core in the NFL last year, to be as good as they were. And yet, they were one field goal away, perhaps, from beating the San Francisco 49ers on the road, so to speak, and going to the NFC Championship game. Whereas the Eagles, great start, terrible finish. Revamp in terms of coaching. Nick Sirianni brings in Kellen Moore as the OC. Let's see how that works out. My first bet I wanted to touch on in this game is about Jalen Hurts. And we got a question yesterday from a new subscriber, Cuppy. I hope if you're watching, I appreciated that comment yesterday. It was a fascinating question about how Saquon affects Jalen Hurts running, especially in terms of the brotherly shove. But this one is in terms of his passing. I'm going to take the over here in terms of Jalen Hurts. I believe it is minus 1,000, over 1.5 passing touchdown. Because at the end of the day, the Packers secondary, yes, it's perhaps the best part of that defense. Really love Jair Alexander. Acquired Xavier McKinney, one of the more underrated corners in the NFL. But I feel confident that Jalen Hurts' burden of being the guy to get the tough physical rushing yards on the ground is going to be released due to Saquon's presence. I feel like Saquon will open up this offense a lot more. Hopefully he's not, becoming more of a chunk play back, and he still has that explosiveness to him, because that will really factor in. But I'm not putting it past Jalen Hurts. I really kind of want him to focus on the passing game, because he has perhaps two of the top wide receiver ones and wide receiver twos in the league in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And I want to see him exploit it. Kellen Moore profiles an exciting young offensive mind. Let's see what he can do in his first game as the OC. But I'm confident in minus 100. Not necessarily long odds here for Jalen Hurts to hit that mark. So why not? I think I'm confident that Jalen Hurts will progress to the point where, he's not always running just to run. He's running to pass as well, and also thinking about that in the back of his mind. So I feel like this is the perfect test game to get off the ground. And then to the other side, a guy who doesn't necessarily run as much, but still kind of uses his legs in different situations. Jordan Love, he's only projected in terms of the over 7.5 rushing yards, as Danny Finsman has got a little 5-legger with Philly money line. Hurts over 225 passing yards. Barkley over 80 yards and a touchdown. D. Smith 70 yards with any time touchdown. That's a very ambitious one. Wishing you the best luck there. I think that I'm confident about Hurts. I'm kind of confident about Barkley as well. But the question lays in Devontae Smith, because a lot of people are expecting him to step up and be that almost a wide receiver one in the system. They expect him to supplant A.J. Brown as the wide receiver one, but I don't want to see it. I want to see Devontae Smith run more aggressive routes. I want to see him more in the red zone. And I want to see Jalen Hurts continue to rely on him as a deep field threat, because that way Jalen Hurts will gain more trust in his deep ball, and thus it will open up more avenues for this offense. So that's an interesting 5-legger. In terms of the money line as well, I am a little skeptical. I don't have the money line in front of me. I do believe that Philly is favored in this game. Don't quote me on that. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a highly competitive game. I see at least 2 of those hidden for you, but I'm not necessarily sure this entire thing will hit. But good luck to you. Otherwise, Danny, thank you for your comments. Thank you for joining the show as well. But let's get back to Jordan Love. Let's get back to his inability kind of as a rusher, whereas we're more confident in Jalen Hurts to potentially rush for more yards. Over 7.5 rushing yards, though, that's a very low total for him. And, he's going to try to distribute the wealth in this first game offense, take advantage of a very young, kind of transitioning secondary in Philly. I'm not necessarily sure how many different players will be starting in the secondary. They still have Darius Slay there. They have Reed Blankenship, who they're seeming to rely upon more and more. And they drafted Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, versatile in his own right. And Quinyon Mitchell brings a lot of speed to the back end as well. So he doesn't know how it's going to translate on the field in their secondary. So look for Jordan Love to try to take advantage of that. But I still think there will be moments where he might improvise, might have a little bit of a design run. So I think I'm comfortable in saying that Jordan Love will get at least 7.5 rushing yards. That's still a little too low in my opinion for him. But then just looking around the week as well, outside of tonight's game, looking ahead to Sunday's slate, there are some interesting bets there, and I want to start in a very interesting game, Steelers-Falcons. Bijan Robinson. Now that it seems like the Falcons want to use him more. Raheem Moore said, we are going to use Bijan Robinson more. Now they have a competent quarterback. His receiving numbers should go up. I always loved him out of the backfield at Texas, and now I think Raheem Morris will have a better understanding of his receiving abilities than Arthur Smith did. Look for him to get a lot of red zone targets and thus hit the over in terms of receiving yards at 25.5. Then going over to Vikings-Giants. Justin Jefferson, over 82.5 receiving yards. We obviously don't know the connection that he'll be able to develop with Sam Darnold, but he still is the number one target for him at the end of the day. So look for Sam Darnold to look for him early and often, get a lot of targets, and thus perhaps a lot of yardage. And the final one that I want to cover, how about my Seahawks going up against the Broncos, and Kenneth Walker. Always a sneaky good rusher in this attack. Maybe not going to get as many touches this year. They seem like they want to be more pass-oriented, but I could comfortably go over 66.5 rushing yards. But let me know what you think in the comments. That will just about do it for this Week 1 segment of today's show. Coming next, we transition to week 2 of the college football season. Should be a wacky week 2, a lot of great games. We'll be right back to close out today's show and the week with that segment.